Scott Miller, Bleacher Report, joins us here on Big Board Sports, national baseball columnist, author of 90% Mental, and written with former pitcher Bob Tewksbury. Recently wrote a piece about the Yankees' pursuit of the Mariners' 1997 home run record, and the timing is perfect, Scott, because that's exactly what we have been talking about here on Big Board Sports this morning. Thanks for a few minutes, Roger Weiland, Chris Honorado in Albany.
Hey, Roger. Hey, Chris. Very
Morning,
nice
Scott.
to be with
Appreciate
you guys.
it, Scott. And it looks like right now, at these numbers, that they're going to have no problem getting to the Seattle Mariners home run record set back in 1997.
Yeah, I mean, that Mariners team was an iconic team, with Ken Griffey Jr. wearing the cap backwards and Jay Buhner, Edgar Martinez, 264 homers. And it's interesting in that a lot of people, I don't think, especially when I wrote the story a week or so ago, a lot of people don't realize, I think, that Mariners team still holds the all-time home run record because, there have been other more famous home run hitters. When Barry Bonds was hitting 73 homers in 1 year in the height of the steroid era, maybe you think the Giants would have held the record. But no, 97 Mariners. But you're right. The Yankees, this year's team that's been assembled, I think is going to smash that record. And, just watching games this week against Atlanta, Sean Newcomb gave up a couple of homers. He gave up a homer the other day. Let's just say that right field porch is pretty short. And some opposing pitchers, Newcomb was the latest, will give up what they think is a fly ball, and then they look, and it's two rows into the seats, and they're shaking their head and rolling their eyes.
And is therein the difference in this Yankee team and the Mariner team, the fact the Yankees do get a big advantage at Yankee Stadium and that short porch, and then you look at their killer lineup and all the guys that can hit home runs anyway, and then you play at Yankee Stadium. Is that going to be ultimately the difference here?
I think it is. I mean, let's not pretend that the Kingdome back where the Mariners played was a pitcher's park,
right,
because that definitely benefited those guys as well. There were times, and I covered several games in that Kingdome years ago, and it was almost like arena baseball. When I was writing the story you're referring to, one thing I got a kick out of as well, they would blow off fireworks even though it was indoors, and it was like a concrete mausoleum. That Kingdome was all concrete. And, Nomar Garciaparra, the old Boston shortstop that's now a TV analyst for the Dodgers, he said, my biggest memory, he said, I remember Junior or somebody hit a home run, and then they'd blow off the fireworks, and then when they did, of course, the smoke doesn't have anywhere to go because it's indoors and in the midst of this concrete bowl, and there'd just be this haze in the air. And Rick Riz, the longtime radio broadcaster, play-by-play guy for the Mariners, said, he remembers that as well. He said sometimes the Mariners would go back-to-back homers, maybe three in a row, and the smoke wouldn't have cleared from the first homer. Then another one would hit, fireworks would blow, and he said pretty soon it looked like a fire hazard in the Kingdome. And had the Yankees, if they played in an indoor ballpark, I think that same thing would be happening. What do they have? I think 6 guys. Aaron Hicks hit his 15th home run the other day, so they've got 6 already before the All-Star game with 15 or more homers. It's they are truly a modern-day Mashers unit.
Griffey hit 56 in the year of 1997 we're talking about here.
Yep.
I don't know that Judge or Stanton get to that number, but combined, they'll be well over 80. There's no doubt about that. Scott Miller of Bleacher Report with us here on Big Board Sports and 104.5 The Team, ESPN Radio. Check him out on Twitter at Scott Miller BBL. Scott, is somebody who covers the game nationally, and so for somebody who's covered it as long as you have back to even to your San Diego days, is this trend of the home run good for the game, do you believe?
I don't like the trend where it's become all or nothing, where I think if the rest of the game was as it's been and we had all these home runs, I'd say fine. But the fact that there are record numbers of strikeouts and that every single year now the strikeout records are being broken, I think the trend for all or nothing, either a home run or a strikeout, I don't think that's necessarily healthy for the game. The one stat that bothers me is even if you remove home runs from the equation, about 33% of the time, the last 3 years, at bats across the game end either in a strikeout, a walk, or a hit batter, and on a few occasions. So, in other words, about a third of the time in today's game, the ball is not even being put in play. That's the troublesome trend for me, and home runs factor into that because, like I say, it's become an all or nothing game. You don't have hitters are just grip it and rip it. You don't see many hitters anymore adjusting with 2 strikes, for example. Hey, I'm going to shorten up my swing. I don't want to strike out. The strikeout's not an embarrassment like it once was, and I think that's the biggest thing that bothers me now is when you've got a third of the time the hitter's either walking back to the dugout or walking down to first base. Baseball's already worried in this age of millennials and short attention spans about the pace of play, and I think this lack of action, lack of balls being put in play, to me is the biggest factor in the game right now, and I think it's a very worrisome trend.
Scott, you wrote a book on baseball, obviously 90% mental. How has that been received?
Yeah, we've been really happy. I appreciate you mentioning that. It's the reviews have been, overwhelmingly positive and good, and it's. I know for a while this spring we were number 1 among all baseball books on Amazon, so we've been happy. It was an interesting subject. Bob Tewksbury from that New Hampshire, grew up in New Hampshire, carved out a real nice career as a pitcher with not particularly overwhelming stuff, but he had to think and outsmart hitters. And then he turned that into, became a mental skills coach, first with the Boston Red Sox for 12 years. Now he's in his second year with the San Francisco Giants. I got to know him a little bit. The end of his career, he finished his last 2 seasons in 1997 and 98. He pitched for the Minnesota Twins, and I covered those teams. I lived in Minnesota at the time, worked for the St. Paul Pioneer Press. So I got to know Tukes a little bit. Good guy. And when he emailed a couple winters ago saying, hey, do you have any interest in writing a book? 2 things jumped out at me. One, I thought this is a guy I'd really enjoy working with. And 2, the subject matter interested me. And I think, one thing that Tukes and I both have been saying is, obviously it's a baseball book, but it's more like a mental skills book for life with a baseball narrative than the other way around. I think a lot of the things that Tukes preaches to players, from breathing, don't forget to breathe, learn how to breathe, to imagery, to visualization. So much of this can be applied, in the business world. It can be applied to our daily lives, as he says, and we cover in the book. No positive result ever comes from a negative thought. That's one thing. So, how many of us in our daily lives, let alone on the baseball field, have negative thoughts that, kind of bombard you during the day, right? Even when you forget your car keys in the morning somewhere or you lose them, how many times and I know, I'm guilty of this, you're searching for your keys and then something else happens and it's not long before you say, it's going to be one of those days. If that's an example of right there, stop, call timeout. Some of the stuff we talk about in the book can even help you improve and get through your day.
The book is 90% mental. Scott Miller of Bleacher Report, along with former big league pitcher Bob Tewksbury. Hey, Scott, one more thing for you. Speaking of pitching, what approach, if you could be an insider with the Mets, what approach would you take with New York in terms of trying to get them back on the right track? Obviously, they would have plenty of suitors, I would imagine, in a trade for a Noah Syndergaard or a Jacob deGrom.
Yeah. First off, all the best to Sandy Alderson, who stepped down as general manager. Who said the cancer that he fought through a couple of years ago is back. So, everybody in baseball is thinking of him, rooting for him. Hopefully, he does what he needs to do to keep that cancer at bay and proceed with a good life. Sandy's a good man. So with him gone, it's interesting how things change because they've got kind of a three-headed general manager right now. You know, his assistants, Omar Minaya, J.P. Ricciardi, and John Rico are in charge, and it'll be interesting to see what they do. I mean, obviously ownership hasn't changed, so I don't know how radically different their philosophy will be. But, yeah, I think at this point the Mets have very little choice but to start trading guys and just start over. I mean, they've tried patches, they've tried quick fixes, they've tried to sign, for example, Jonas Cespedes as a free agent. They felt, when they got to the 2015 World Series with Harvey and Syndergaard and DeGrom, I mean, I know most of us felt like, man, if they just put a few hitters around those guys, they're going to be in good shape. And they've not been able to take advantage of those pitchers, and they're only getting older and banged up more. Syndergaard can't stay healthy. I think I shot DeGrom. He's under club control through 2020, so not just this year but next year and the year after. I think that he will command a huge price because he's two things. One, he's under control for another few years. Two, it's hard to see him being more valuable than he is right now. I mean, the guy's pitched his butt off this year. His 1.84 ERA or wherever he's at. This guy has truly been an ace, and he's affordable, and he's got a couple more years left. And
coming up today on the vacuum,
the Mets could build a winner around that. But given present circumstances, I think their best bet is to shop him, bring a 5 or 6 prospect haul back, and hit the reset button.
Scott Miller, pleasure having you on the show, man. Great job. Bleacher Report, National Baseball columnist. Great job with the book, you and Tewksbury. And we appreciate a few minutes here on ESPN Radio in Albany.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you. Appreciate it. And, I'll pass through Albany on my way to Cooperstown here.
There you go. There you go.
Right.
That's not far. Once you get to Albany, you're closing in. That's for sure. Scott, thanks for a few minutes.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, guys.